And now the time has come to welcome our first keynote speaker. Is Dr. Dimitris Kairidis. He is an honorable member of the Greek Parliament with New Democracy for Athens North and a professor of international politics, former Minister of Migration and Asylum. Dr. Kairidis, please, the floor is yours. Welcome. Thank you.
Well, it's a great joy and a great honor and a great privilege to be with you this afternoon in this event, fantastic event that you put together for the 9th time in a row. Thank you very much for the very kind invitation, both to the Chamber and to the Embassy, and congratulations for organizing and putting together all these great panels and panelists. It is a testimony of the strength and vitality of the Greek-Swedish relationship, which is excellent, but it can always go further. I know. How are you doing? Go further and improve even further. Now, in my various parliamentary hats, I am also the head of the Greek delegation to NATO's Parliamentary Assembly, and in that capacity, I had the luck recently to visit Scandinavia, including Sweden, and to admire firsthand the strengths of the country. Sweden might be a small country, comparatively speaking, a medium-sized country. It is actually a country that produces its own 4.5 fighter, Gripen, for example, when it comes to defense, which is my specialty. It is the smallest country in the world producing such an advanced aircraft, and it speaks volumes to the capacity, technological advances, and ability of Swedish industry. I'm only saying this because Sweden has been the most recent member of NATO, joined only very recently in March 2024, after 2 years of some acrimony with our eastern neighbor and Hungary. But it is a member, and since your meeting here is entitled, and it's all about transitions, this is par excellence a great transition, because here you have a country that has been famous for its neutrality for more than 200 years because of geostrategic exchange, which I am here to speak about, joined NATO, abandoned its traditional stand of neutrality. It's a country that did not participate in the First nor in the Second World War, for example, but now it is a full member and actually a very staunch member of the Atlantic Alliance. Which might not be the same as of later tonight, depending on the results that we might have, which will be another transition. I think it goes without saying to say that we live in an age of transition. And especially when one looks at the international system from a distance, one cannot escape the fact that the international system as a whole is going through a power transition. The old monopoly of the United States, as we knew it after the end of the Cold War in the 90s and in the 2000s, is giving way to the emergence of new powers, first and foremost, obviously, China, but not only, India, the coming back to some extent of Russia, and other emerging big powers. Now, this is a meeting taking place, obviously, in Athens. And since we are in Athens, let me make a reference to the proudest, one of the proudest Athenians of all times, which we in the international relations use a lot and refer to a lot, called Thucydides, the prominent historian and political theorist who wrote his famous work on the Peloponnesian War, trying to explain why the war happened. And we know from him that periods of transition, periods of power transition in the international system are periods full of dangers and risks. When the power balance, the established power balance, is upset, we tend to have frictions. And there has been a book by a former professor of mine, Graham Allison, The Thucydides Trap, who went and studied several transitions since the Peloponnesian War, which was caused by the rise of Athens and the fear this caused. In his famous quote, the fear this caused to Sparta, has gone to study 10, 12 transitions since. Most of them ended up in generalized war, which doesn't speak well about our future and the US-China rivalry that is intensifying as we speak. Obviously, politicians have a lot to do with managing more peacefully and smoothly these transitions, and it is our responsibility to learn from the past and try to avoid a catastrophic out in the open kind of war between the great powers of today, which will have obviously devastating consequences for the whole of humanity. At a time when the very existence of humanity is in peril by not only climate change, as we often say, I would say climate collapse, which we are witnessing today. While we are fighting each other, planet Earth is on red alert. But Thucydides, as much as he has been talked about, the explanations he gave, the systemic explanations he gave for the war, should also be famous for something else, which is very relevant to the present. And this is, he tried to explain the paradox of the outcome of the war, why the war ended the way it did, meaning why did the more powerful party, that is Athens, lost the war. Athens is the big power at the beginning of the war. And Athens is described in these glorious terms in the famous funeral address of Pericles at the end of the first year of the war. Athens is powerful, is wise, is well-led, is artistic and cultural, but brave and patriotic and honest and entrepreneurial and dynamic compared to stagnant Sparta, right, etc. Nevertheless, this Athens, this glorious Athens of Pericles, loses the war. And the explanation that Thucydides gives is that it lost not by Sparta, but by Athens itself. The reason for Athens' defeat lies in Athens itself and the decline, the degeneration of its polity, of its democracy, of its republic, and the replacement of Pericles, the famous leader, which obviously Thucydides was in love with, at least platonically, by the demagogues, by people like Cleon and Alcibiades and everybody else we know. So it was the internal decadence, the internal decay caused by the war that led to the defeat of the most powerful party, of Athens itself, with the failure of the Sicilian campaign and everything else. And I think this is very relevant for us today. The West is very powerful. In objective terms, it is still more than 60% of world GDP, it is more than 80% of world research, and 80% of world defense expenditure. The United States alone accounts for more than half of world expenditure in defense. And it is unrivaled when it comes to force projection all over the globe, with an amazing network of alliances and bases, not only in Europe, but throughout. Nevertheless, there is a sense of crisis and there is a sense of decline. Most obviously in Europe, but also everywhere in the West. In America, one of the two presidential contenders speak about an Armageddon if his opponent wins, and it will be the end of America, it will be the end of democracy, elections. For Donald Trump, it is hell coming. For him and his voters, the sense of decline and the sense of imminent disaster is very, very real, although it's not necessarily based on facts. What the West should be most afraid today, as Thucydides taught us so many centuries ago, is itself. And it is the decline and the degeneration of its polities, of its institutions, of its democracies. Now, democracies obviously have gone through cycles, and we have seen populist surges in the past, but there is something, at least as far as I am concerned, of a qualitative difference in this current crisis. It's not only a cycle, and there will be an upsurge soon, but there is something going on that we are only starting to contemplate, let alone understand very, very recently. It has to do, obviously, with economic inequalities and the pressures felt by the middle and lower classes in many countries in the West. But it also has to do with cultural and non-material kind of developments that are based, however, on new technologies, none other being more important than internet. Our democracies are not meant for the algorithm. And the internet algorithm is a cancer that is eating our democracies from the inside. Because what it does, the internet, and the way that we receive our news today, which are so important because it is the citizens. Democracies, in order to survive and to function, need informed citizens who are the ones who decide at the end of the day, right? But today, instead of those spreadsheets and venerable press institutions that we used to have, with a certain journalistic objectivity of the past, we get these sites and this internet that only feeds on our prejudices and on our stereotypes and refeeds on them, because the algorithm will feed you with the news that you have chosen to read, and will create a capsule, a closed circuit, refeeding you with the news that you want, news, quote unquote, that you want to read. And as a result, will create an enclosed environment, not an open dialogue, not an open space, not challenging your views and prejudices, and little by little will create different and competing universes. Today, America is two Americas that don't speak to each other. Not only they don't speak to each other, they don't like each other. Not only they don't like each other, actually they hate each other, almost hate each other. The way the America of the cities, of the coasts, of the more educated people think and speak about the deplorable, quote unquote, half, the other half of America, of the interior, of the countryside, of the small communities, of the deindustrialized Rust Belt, of the South with its old prejudices, racial prejudices, and so on and so forth. And those two Americas read take their news from very partisan sources. They don't interact. And polarization is part of the democratic game. And there is always rivalry. And politics is a battle by other means, obviously. We all know that from our theory. But these days, things are going a level up and up and up on the intensity and the toxicity and the venom of that rivalry. And as a result, our foes, geostrategic foes, who are all too ready to exploit our vulnerabilities, like President Putin, and the disinformation campaign and the interference in our politics in 2016 in Brexit and in the US elections, in 2017 against Macron in the presidential election in France, and so on and so forth. We have the proliferation of anti-systemic negative forces. We live in the politics of negativity. Most people vote for Kamala Harris not because they are in love with her, but because they don't want to see Trump to come to power, and vice versa. And so we don't vote for, but we vote against something to a much greater extent than in the past. And our political systems are becoming more and more dysfunctional. And being dysfunctional, they start affecting our ability to compete, our ability to sustain our primacy as far as living standards and wealth and power is concerned. And so if I were to speak of a danger in this transition, in this period of transition, I will, despite the fact that I am an international relations expert, will turn to the domestic political scenes. Here in Greece, we have great experience with populism and with crisis. We have been experts in this field. And judging from the recent election, it will be the Euro election, it will be a mistake to think that we are immunized for good and forever against the forces of unreason, the forces of extremism, the forces of populism and demagoguery, the forces that made Athens a loser 2,500 years ago and can turn our venerated West with its democracy, its freedoms, its human rights, for all the mistakes and deficits and problems that we have, can turn them into a loser in this power competition with the Oriental East. But here we are, together with Sweden, to give that good fight. We on the one side of Europe and you on the other side of Europe, facing common challenges and risks and even threats, I would say, today, but sharing same interests and, more importantly, and that's why our relationship is so deep, same values and commitments to human dignity. Sweden has been a stellar example of that. It is a country that has been admired the world over for its economic and social model, for its institutions, for its policies. Obviously, it is going under a transition itself. Both the social welfare system, the migration system, and all sorts of other arrangements that are under tremendous pressure, but need to adapt to the new realities. But I think together we can achieve it so much better and so much more. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some very preliminary and sketchy thoughts this afternoon, as everybody is holding his and her breath for the outcome of the most important elections in the world. Unfortunately, we do not vote. We only feel the consequences of these elections. But to finish on an optimistic note, I think that women, if the world is to be saved, and if liberalism and democracy is to be saved, it will be women and women's vote today that will make all the difference. So I'm so lucky and so happy to speak after two distinguished women and to wish you all very well. Thank you very much.